Okay, testing, 1, 2, 3. Can you guys all hear me? I hope you can, because this is my second try at using my new HD webcam to record a video here at my computer desk. As you can see, it's a little unorthodox. I actually have a back-to-back couch where my desk is, but that's beside the point. This video, of course, as you saw by the thumbnail and the title, is going to be a Pokemon theory video. This is in regards to trying to branch my channel out and try to, because the last month and a half have been kind of slow on subscriber comments, views, that kind of stuff. So I'd really like to push some more content that you guys maybe want to see or ideas I have, and just try to find a niche that kind of sticks, and that people want to see more of. And then maybe other content that I want to do, like retro Let's Plays and stuff, will get a little more views and garner a little more substantiate a little bit, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm hoping videos like this might, which I searched YouTube and I couldn't really find a theory quite like this one, so it's of my own design, and I'd like to share it with you all. So without further ado, let's get started. This is Griever, of course, with Pokemon theory: is Mew the true first Pokemon, or is Arceus? So I'm sure I'll come up with a way more badass title later on, for the actual video itself. But yeah, so let's just jump right into the theory. Now, this theory stems from a little bit of research I did a couple months back, and it's a thing that I'm not exactly a Gen 1er, but I don't really care for the Sinnoh region. I thought it was just a rehash of Pokemon. Say what you want about Johto, and say what you want about the 5th generation and stuff like that, but overall, I really did not care for the Sinnoh region. Now, so take my opinion with a grain of salt. I can admit that freely, and I'll probably get more dislikes, but if I get a bunch of dislikes, it still means I get a lot of views. So I'll take whatever publicity, good, bad press is still press, So this theory stems from the idea that Arceus is not the true Pokemon god, and that Mew is still the ancestor of all Pokemon, and that does not break any of the lore and information we got in the games. Now, this does not include the anime, this does not include the mangas, and for this case in point, because the anime deviates from game logic, while the game logic deviates from manga logic, and the fact that there is multiple different mangas that kind of contradict themselves in their own way. So I'm just going to stick to the core original Pokemon, following the core games and any information that they specifically stated or gave us. Now, in this theory, it might seem like I'm a bit of a Gen 1er and I'm a hater of the Sinnoh legendaries. I am not. I'm just trying to find something that, a theory that will kind of be for fun, but also kind of shed some light and not so much retcon the Kanto Pokemon because they came up with an idea, in the 4th generation. So that's kind of the idea. That's what I propose in this video, that Arceus is not God, neither is Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina, and that Mew is still their ancestor. Mew is the very first Pokemon to ever existed. So with that being said, let's get started with the theory. Okay guys, so this time, unlike other videos, I'm actually sitting at my computer, I'm kind of laid back, kind of doing this informally. So this time I actually have a slight, kind of points to kind of break on the side here on the screen. I did not do this during my The Last Jedi review for Star Wars, and maybe that was the problem with not getting any views for it, because I thought I made some good points that I haven't heard from any of the other reviewers about the movie. But that's neither here nor there. But this time I broke it down into a few points. So you guys heard the overall general overview of the theory, but I just want to, kind of catch up to speed on how I came to this conclusion. So let's use core information we know from the games and go straight to the Pokedex right off the bat. Now, in Generation 4, we have Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, Heart Gold, and Soul Silver, of course, as you all know. Now, in these Pokedex entries, we find terms such as legend, mythology, it has been said. Nothing to actually state a fact. These are observations, theories, possibilities. And that is no more true than in all of Arceus's Pokedex entries that I could find about him shaping the world, about him being formed from an egg, about his 1,000 arms. It all says, let's take diamonds right off the bat here, for example. It is described in mythology as the Pokemon that shaped the universe with its 1,000 arms. In Heart Gold, it says, according to the legends of Sinnoh, this Pokemon emerged from an egg and shaped all there is in the world. Okay, so all of this is stating mythology, legends. It is said, nothing to actually state that this is fact, that this is true. This has been confirmed by Professor Ronan, Professor Oak, Professor Birch, whoever. This has not been confirmed, and it currently is not an accepted definite in the Pokemon universe or world as a whole. And I believe this stems from a very simple fact. Now, here's where we delve into theory a little bit. Each of the Pokemon generations, not so much the first gen. Now, you can argue Fire Red, Leaf Green as remakes had a bit of an overall theme, but I believe that each region has, and each core generation of games has its own theme, and that can almost be summed up in one word. And I would believe that the fourth generations is mystic, legend, ancestry, tradition. I won't go as far to say religion, but the faith, those kind of things. Tradition, faith, and legend are probably the three best words to describe the generation as a whole, because all the people you meet are so rich with tradition and the way things were, and ancient past and ancient ruins and things like that. They really have a feel for this stuff. And it's described by not only the champion and the champion's grandparents living in Celestial Town, but also just throughout other characters, even as far as Team Galactica and stuff like that. There's just plenty of people, and especially the main characters you interact with, that believe in these legends and myths of Sinnoh. And across the towns we see statues and markings and ruins, all dedicated to these legendary Pokemon. Now, that's not a new concept added to the Pokemon world, but I'd like to argue the fact that Arceus and the entire Sinnoh region are not so much estranged from the rest of the Pokemon world, but they're both mystic but almost occultist level or fanatic level about these legendary Pokemon, you know? I mean, you have the legendary birds, and you have the legendary dogs or beasts, however you want to say them. You have the Reggies and these kind of things in the three previous regions. But in these regions, there might be a person or two close to the site where these Pokemon dwell that talk about them or believe in them and say, this is a very powerful Pokemon. But that is at most been limited to about a town at best, and maybe an important figure at most. It's not really an accepted region-wide thing yet. But within these people, many of them believe the myths and legends of the ancient Pokemon, and that they are not only have the power of gods, but they are actually gods upon themselves. They are the creators of the Pokemon universe as we know it. Now, I'm going under the illusion or the disillusion or the assumption, however, whatever term you want to use for this, that this is false. Not so much false of their faith or their belief, but that they have bestowed these legendary, very powerful Pokemon with the idea of being gods. Not godlike, not extremely powerful, not destructive, but literal gods. I believe they've become almost fanatical in their ancient traditions, and I really have to stress the term that the Pokedex entry has coined the term myth across most of their entries. Now, I'm just going to scroll down here to bring up a point that might already some of you might be saying who have memorized the Pokedex might bring up, and that is, yeah, right here. I only brought up Arceus, but let's look at one of the other creation trio, Dialga's Pokedex entry that states, it is the power to control time, period. Now that is that's just the first sentence, but that is an actual factual statement. The Pokedex entry, which is scientific, you know, believes in the science and the biology level and the evolution side of the Pokemon world, has stated that it literally has the power to control time. I am not taking away this power from Dialga. I am simply stating that does not make it a god of time. That just simply means it has a power to warp and manipulate time. And that is also not a trait unfounded in Pokemon outside of the Sinnoh region itself. Maybe not necessarily the power to control time, but extraordinary abilities. These are some of these, just to be listed, are still legendary and mythical Pokemon, but are not considered gods by their respective regions or anyone that I found in the Pokemon Core series to bring it up. These would include Celebi being able to pass through and travel through time and possibly dimensions, and has just a mere shrine in the forest of Johto. Then we also, from Johto, we have Ho-Oh and Lugia. Lugia being just an extremely powerful Pokemon, and having control, or having given one of the towers in Ecruteak City, where they, both Lugia and Ho-Oh, the twin birds, are revered, you know, by this community, by this small town. Nonetheless, they are never referred to as gods, but they are also revered and, you know, worshipped, possibly as such, but they're never referred to as a deity or a god or a creator, even though Ho-Oh himself has been stated to have resurrected the dead, which I would say is an on-par ability with a godlike Pokemon, or at least it definitely is up there with these types of abilities of controlling time and space and such like that. I would say resurrecting the dead is a big thing. Yveltal from the Generation 6, when he absorbs all life when he dies, or it dies, that's kind of maybe an OP ability and not necessarily godlike, but the fact that it can absorb all life. So it could absorb the creation trio. Okay, so, or are they not considered alive? Well, now you're into a whole other realm of things. So see what I mean? There's a lot of controversy when you think of these things as gods. So Yveltal is not considered a god, but he absorbs all life when it dies. So are you saying that Arceus is not alive? Or and neither is, because it states all life. So Dialga, Palkia, the Lake Trio, all these Pokemon considered gods in the Sinnoh region, they don't count? Or you're saying that Yveltal, a not god Pokemon, can absorb all the god Pokemon when it dies? That seems a little contradictory. And then you have Victini, who creates infinite energy. I could go on, but we're just going to end it right there with that. All I'm trying to state, I think you guys have already seen my point, is that you have all these incredible Pokemon with all these massively creative abilities and massive, powerful, god-like abilities, but the only ones referred to as gods is in the generation and the region that is held deeply in ancient tradition, myths, belief, and legends. There might be a common denominator here, especially with the term mythology. Now, not to bring a too big human world aspect to this theory, but just to skim the surface of it here, the religions of today might be considered mythology tomorrow, because the religions of the past are now, to our mind, considered mythology of today. I'm not going to bring up any examples. I don't want this video to seem like a hate thing or get flagged or anything like that. Not that I monetize them, but you never know. And I just I don't want people to think that I'm sitting up here being biased. I'm just pointing out a historical fact that religions, the oldest religions that we can date back to, seem to be rejected as mythology of today, where science has improved. And now, you know, possibly the religions of today's society could be rejected tomorrow if science advances even further. And in a world where evolution is a core aspect, being the Pokemon world, it seems likely that the scientific route and the biology route seems much more likely. So yeah, let's just let's scroll back up here for a moment and relook at that. So all this is stating is that, by the sounds of it, it seems like the only Pokemon referred to ever as being gods with these extraordinary abilities, even though other Pokemon from other generations exhibit these abilities, it's only in the Sinnoh region where they're referred to as the creation trio, as gods, as creating the Pokemon universe, controlling time and space, controlling a distortion world, their own dimensions, all these things. So with all that being said, why don't we just move on to the Mew aspect of things? Now, some of you guys might have sat there and already disliked the video or exited. I hope you stuck around, because I brought up the fact that Arceus and the other legendaries from Sinnoh have a lot of conjecture or assumptions in there and theories in their Pokedex entries, not actual factual, and I'm sitting up here saying that that's okay, but Mew's is solid. I'm not saying that, because the Pokedex entries for Mew are quite similar to the ones of Arceus and such. But just hear me out for a second here, guys. Let's just go down Mew's thing. What is Mew? Well, Mew was, when first conceived, Mew was considered the first mythical Pokemon, the Pokemon that everyone was after. The journals on Cinnabar Island state that they were looking a very long time for the first, the legendary, the mythical Pokemon, the Ancestor Pokemon, which is what Mew is still considered. That is a factual. He is still considered the Ancestor Pokemon. And this Pokemon is, is thought to be the first, and they created Mewtwo as a result of that. Okay, so that was established back in Generation 1. Now, instead of retconning this idea, which would take away the fact that Mew is the ancestor Pokemon, the reason why Mew, out of all the Pokemon, can learn every single move, every TM, all that stuff. Now, I believe there's one move, I think it's Draco Meteor, or maybe it's Judgment, that Mew cannot learn, and that's been a basis for some people believing the creationist theory over the evolution theory as far as the Pokemon world is concerned and the Pokemon history of the Pokemon universe. I forget which one it is, but I'm not going to delve into technicalities with that one. I just want to bring up the fact that for the most part and for many generations, that was the case. Mew could learn all the moves. Now, and it was also said that Mew had the DNA of every single Pokemon. Mew has all their DNA, or at least every Pokemon can be traced all the way back to Mew with their DNA. That Mew's kind of the start. Okay, well, let's do a quick real-world term or a real-world look on this theory for just a moment, just like we did with the religious aspects or the mythologies of Arceus and Sinnoh. Let's look at Mew and Kanto for just a moment. If you took a mammal, or let's use the example of a dog. Now, this has no basis, guys. This is just an example. It's got no actual basis for real-world dogs. But if you had a ancestor dog or wolf, and a dog-like wolf, a mammal, and they lived in one part of the world. Let's say, well, let's say Europe. Let's say Central Europe. Okay, and then of course you had the Ice Age and you had a bunch of things. But this one tribe of mammals lived quite peacefully. But then, they got separated by, different changes in the ecosystems, different, climates, the evolution of the world, the Ice Age and the meteors and things like that changed the environment. We know for a fact that the environment changed over time, ecosystems changed, and, of course, mammals migrate, to survive. And they adapt to their ecosystems to survive. And this is what's considered evolution. They evolve to change, to adapt and survive so they can keep going forward so they don't get extinct and die off. Now, this doesn't always happen, and sometimes it's unsuccessful, but that's nature. But sometimes it does succeed. Life finds a way, to quote, Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park. That really brings it home here, because if you take this mammal-like dog creature, and you could say that it's split off into the wolves of the north, of the household dogs of the West. You could say it brings up coyotes and different mutations of wolves and different from anywhere from the small little dogs all the way to the big ones, depending on their ecosystems, especially considering that wolves, possibly in Asia, don't exactly represent the same type of wolf up in the Arctic, and stuff like that. So all I'm trying to suggest is that that's evolution. That's what happens over time, but they all stem, all these different dog breeds that some of them can't, I don't believe some of them can even interbreed, can all be traced back to one specific type of breed of this mammal. Now, you guys can argue this, and I'm sure there's some biologist or anthropomorphic person in the, not anthropomorphic, that's someone like a dog-like person, that's an Inuyasha. But you guys know what I mean. Some type of scientist studying this will probably, write in the comments an entire essay onto why that was total ludicrous and that was wrong. But all I'm trying to state is that evolution, from a mammal can spread out like a spider web across multiple things, just like a family tree. It starts with two people, those two people, and then you add more people in, and then it diversifies. It's like a tree. It goes, it's bigger at the bottom than it is at the top. So in the same sense, getting back to Pokemon, this is the same with Mew. If you take the original concept and idea that Mew was the first Pokemon and that all Pokemon kind of deviated off of Mew, okay, that's the theory that we've been going on for quite a few generations, up until, of course, we got the Sinnoh region in the 4th generation. Now, the difference between these two theories I will bring up in a moment, but I just want everyone to sit back and think for a minute. This series of games, Pokemon, when you think about it, you know, I'm not going to get into a religion or mythology or faith versus science, discovery, and new. I'm not going to get into that technology versus, you know, old school and tradition and all that stuff. But if you're going to take the Arceus and the Creation Trio as just that, a creationist theory, that there was a godlike figure who created this world and all that stuff, and then you're going to take Mew being, you know, just a regular old mammal, and then spreading out through the process of, you know, evolution and that kind of stuff in science, I have to ask you guys just one thing. What is the Pokemon world based in? What is your goal as a Pokemon trainer? Or at least the goal that has been set up since the 90s when we were first introduced. What's even the catchphrase? Is gotta catch them all. And why do you gotta catch them all? Why do you catch them all? To fill out the Pokedex. And is the Pokedex not a scientific biography or encyclopedia of Pokemon information, scientific information, their height, their weight, their footprint, their locations, a description on their habits, where they can be found, all these things, all this information. And what's the other core aspect? So your journey is basically of scientists. Your mentors are always professors in every game. Every core series game, there's a professor who sends out young, bright minds out into the world to learn about these magical, mystical Pokemon and figure out what they do, how they are. It's simply a scientific, like a Discovery Channel documentary we're playing. And I just want to shed a little light on that. Now, if you agree with this, or even if you disagree, there's another concept we both cannot disagree on, even if you don't agree on this point, is the fact evolution. Evolution is simply a factual core aspect of the Pokemon games. Evolution is part of the reason we all evolve our Pokemon. I mean, we might not all do. I still keep my Pikachu at a Pikachu. I think it's blasphemy to give it a Thunderstone. But that's beside the point. One of the main core aspects is still evolution. And throughout the core series games, there's been more ways to evolve, different ways to evolve, different methods. We rediscover pre-evolutions, different evolutions, new evolution methods. The game's entire, you know, core aspect, one of the main core aspects of Pokemon that has stayed consistent is the process of evolving, evolution of Pokemon. So this begs the question between a creationist theory and an evolutionist theory, if you want to break it down in the simplest of terms. The Arceus thing is creationist with the Sinnoh legendaries, and the Mew aspect is an evolution theory. Now, between the two, what has been from the beginning, and yet even after 4th generation, all the way to the 7th generation, what is still a core aspect of the Pokemon world? And I believe that speaks for itself. Now, guys, this might seem like it's a bit of an arrogant thing to state, because all I've been basically doing is bashing Arceus and the Sinnoh legendaries and saying, believe this one's simply based on the fact that evolution has more to do with the Pokemon world than, you know, creation and godlike Pokemon and stuff. And you can make a ton of arguments against this. And I haven't actually fixed this. All I've done is say, okay, believe my Mew theory that Mew was before Arceus because, you know, evolution makes more sense, and it doesn't fix anything. You know, now you've just traded in the retcons of Mew in for retcons of Arceus, you know. Not exactly. Let's go back to the beginning of the video. The beginning of the video, I stated that the people of the Sinnoh region were very fanatical, very cultist, very deep and enriched in their traditions. And I'd just like to bring that up to a point, is that the people of Sinnoh, even across, as the Pokemon I brought up before, Ho-Oh, Celebi, Victini, Yveltal, let's use even just really powerful Pokemon like Lugia and Mewtwo. Now, Mewtwo was, of course, a scientific experiment and stuff like that, but bear with me now. Let's bring up some of the Hoenn. Let's bring up, you know, the Regis and stuff, and that might not be a great example because Regigigas is in the Sinnoh region and stuff, and that's a whole different kettle of fish. But you can bring up ancient dragon Pokemon. You can bring up, you know, any Reshiram and Zekrom and all these different very powerful Pokemon with all these amazing abilities. However, I just want to bring up the fact that all these Pokemon have been once again considered very powerful, legendary, destructive, the power to destroy the world, yet none of them outside of the Sinnoh have been considered godlike. Why is this? Well, once again, going back to the original point, Sinnoh is very deep in its tradition and its legends. These people are not exactly a cult or anything like that. They're just very fanatical about their traditions. They believe they are right, just like any other, you know, mythological, any worshipper would. And I'd just like to bring up the point that we've actually been introduced to this before. With the Delta episode in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, this holds even more weight because we had these Draconian or Draconode people that worshipped Rayquaza or Rayquaza as, you know, the supreme Pokemon. They didn't really use the term deity, but you know, I'm sure if you went back far enough, there were ancient drawings of Groudon and Kyogre and you know, Rayquaza stopping them and all this stuff. You know, they were revered as ancient, powerful, mystical Pokemon. They just weren't referred to the term as God. I just think that the Sinnoh region in particular, because notice that no one really outside of the Sinnoh region that I can tell really refers to these Pokemon as godlike or the Pokemon gods or anything like that. They are simply referred to as legendaries, you know, from the Sinnoh mythology, from this, from that, never actually stated outside. You know, no one actually states them to be the god or gods. You know, so what I'm just trying to point out here is the fact that, you know, you have to take the Sinnoh region almost as the select region of very people deep in tradition that maybe their ancestors took it a step too far and believed that these Pokemon with all this. I want to stress this right now. The Giratina, Palkia, Dialga, Arceus, the Lake Trio, all very, very powerful Pokemon in their own right. This is not a rating to say that Mew as the first or ancestor Pokemon is more powerful than Arceus. I'm not trying to say that. I'm not trying to, you know, diminish. This is not an Arceus versus Mew for who's the strongest. This is a who was first. This is a chicken and an egg theory, not a who's the strongest. You know, first does not necessarily mean the strongest Pokemon. I'm just trying to state that these Pokemon are quite powerful. It's almost very Godzilla film-esque. You know, Godzilla, the term Godzilla itself implies the term a god monster. Is Godzilla a god? That's all you have to ask yourself. They coined the term Godzilla for this incredible monster with this destructive power that nobody could stop and nobody could understand. So Arceus comes in, shows a bunch of, you know, or Dialga, roar of times the hell out of the Sinnoh region. Palkia fights back, you know, and use Spatial Rend against Roar of Time. They blow up the Spear Pillar. They blow up a bunch of the region. A bunch of ancestors for the Sinnoh, you know, people witness this battle, think that the gods and the heavens themselves are fighting. And they carry that down through the thing. And the difference between this region and the other regions is that the Sinnoh region still stayed more true to, held on to these ancient beliefs, whereas, you know, maybe the Kanto and the Johto and the Hoenn and, you know, the Kalos region all kind of evolved, not evolved a little bit, or maybe that's a good term to use, that's ironic, but kind of, you know, science went the way just like it did in today's world, where, you know, certain mythologies, you know, kind of went to the way of the dodo, and it kind of went back, you know, to a more scientific approach, is all I'm trying to stress. And so basically, there's nothing really else to say here, guys. It simply... It fixes a lot of the points in this world, because you're not retconning Mew, because Mew can still be the first Pokemon, and you can still have Arceus be a powerful godlike Pokemon. He still could have been a creator Pokemon. He still could have, you know, from him, Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina still could be there. You can bring up the dimension thing. They have their own dimensions. Okay, Ultra Beasts have their own dimensions. What else you got? You know, like, are Ultra Beast gods? No? Okay, well, they have their dimension. Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina have theirs. You know, it's not, you know, the dimensions don't prove they're gods. Their powers, Pokemon, don't prove they're gods. So, what do you have left? I'm simply under the impression that Mew was the first, is still the ancestor Pokemon, that clears up what we learned from the first 3 generations, and that the Sinnoh people are simply under a belief or a faith or believe in the ancient stories of the legendary Pokemon of Sinnoh and have given them a godlike status. They are no more than simply very powerful, very old, and very legendary rare Pokemon with immense power. I'm not taking away their powers. I'm simply stating that they're not literal gods, because this does not retcon them. It simply makes and weaken these Pokemon. It simply gives, it keeps everything as a Pokemon and not a deviation between Pokemon and Pokemon gods, quite literally. And this will screw up a lot of other people's Pokemon history videos and stuff, of course, but once again, this is simply a theory. It is just my own thoughts on the topic. Once again, I'm not a huge fan of Sinnoh, but this has nothing to do with that, and I am not a Gen 1er either, though I did grow up on the original Pokemon. I just think that this fixes some problems, such as, you know, young trainers somehow capturing God, you know, you know, like, what happens as a result of that? If you capture Giratina, is there more than one? Does this distortion world fall apart? What happens? You know, it fixes a lot of questions I've seen in a lot of top 10 unanswered questions, or top 10 things we want to know, or top 10, you know, or top 10 things in Pokemon that just shouldn't happen. It's always on these lists. It's about a young 10-year-old, 12-year-old, who cares? Any trainer, an adult, capturing, let's say it's Cynthia. So Cynthia captures Arceus. Now she's the most powerful trainer in the world. She's a Pokemon master. Why? She's got God. You know, and, you know, it simply brings up a point that if you eliminate the thing that they are godlike, they're very powerful, and they're not gods, you've now fixed quite a few of the things. So that's all I'm trying to say. You keep Mew as his status as the first, and they weren't wrong about that. They're not trying to retcon that. He's still the first. Arceus and all these Pokemon grew from Mew. That keeps in line with the fact that Mew still has the DNA of all Pokemon, and Arceus can still retain his godlike position over the Sinnoh region, though it might be a little a little bit of too much faith and a little bit of misled belief that he's the actual Pokemon god. That's kind of all I'm saying here in this theory. So to conclude the video, let's just go down the final points of this theory. We brought up the point that the Sinnoh legendaries are not actual gods. They're simply very old, very powerful Pokemon with very powerful, even godlike abilities for even as far as legendary Pokemon are concerned. But as we stated and proved, there was a lot of other Pokemon with god level status abilities that are not considered gods, though they are still revered and worshipped in their respective regions, though they are still not considered on that same status, and that the people of Sinnoh are simply very fanatical in their ancient beliefs. This also fixes any retcons about Mew being the first ancestor Pokemon and still containing the DNA of every Pokemon inside of him, because if Arceus comes first and creates the Lake Trio and the Creation Trio and all this stuff, and Regigigas and all this stuff, then it doesn't make sense. How could they be so wrong about Mew for so long? We're containing the DNA of every Pokemon, and now Mew's learning of every move doesn't make as much sense, and all this just other stuff that just doesn't seem to really make a whole lot of sense. That's fixed now if he goes back to being stated as the original Pokemon. This fixes, of course, the multitude of issues with young trainers capturing not just powerful Pokemon anymore. That's a separate topic for a whole nother video, a 10-year-old having the power of a Charizard. But, you know, in this world of Pokemon, capturing a literal god seems to be a bit of a crux, or a bit of a, you know, plot hole, even as far as Pokemon is concerned. This fixes that problem. It also keeps the theme of one of the core aspects of the game being evolution and scientific discovery, whereas the Pokemon world at the beginning of the series was going for very solid world building and finding and discovering new species of new Pokemon. The very scientific, the Pokedex is once again just a scientific, encyclopedia. The professors and everything just lends itself to be a very big science-based game, about biology and scientific discovery, and then to just kind of in the 4th generation to say, let's throw that all out the window. We have all the answers, and everything after this, forget collecting all the Pokemon and catch them all and the Pokedex, because it doesn't matter, because we have all the answers. We just need to capture Arceus and study him, and we'll have all the answers. That, the world was created by Arceus, and there's nothing left to discover in the world. Who cares? That kind of fixes that little problem that I've actually seen quite a few more popular YouTubers bring up before, is that having Arceus just stand out as this Pokemon god, it seems to make a lackluster for the professors of the Pokemon world to basically have their job anymore. And of course, similarly, keeping with the above points, you can poke holes in the Sinnoh Legends version. This version, which keeps all the Pokemon as just Pokemon, from the weak to the powerful to the almost godlike, but still keeps them as simple Pokemon. And that's basically the end of this video, guys, in this theory. Those are the final rundown points. If you guys think I missed something, I probably did. This was sort of thrown together last minute, even though I've been thinking about it for a while. I really wanted to get this video out before the new year. And I don't have a lot of time around the Christmas season, but I'd really like to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments section below. I'm trying a few different things, especially getting this new webcam on Cyber Monday, trying to branch out with some different videos. So tell me what you think of this one. Do you want me to do more theory videos? How can I improve on these ones? And if you did like this, but you think it needs some tweaking, just once again, constructive criticism, comments below. I'd really like to hear from you guys. So this has been Griever with your theory video, and I'll be signing out now. Have a Merry Christmas, guys. Later.